At 13:42 on the afternoon of October 12, 1944, Flight Officer Charles E. Yeager banked his P-51D Mustang into a sharp right turn at 26,000 feet above the Rhine River, watching 20 Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters swarm toward his four-plane flight like wolves closing on wounded prey. 21 years old, flying his seventh combat mission since returning from escape and evasion in occupied France, Yeager had grown up hunting squirrels in the hills of Hamlin, West Virginia, where his father worked as a driller in the natural gas fields. The Luftwaffe's Jagdgeschwader 53 had concentrated 3 full squadrons along the Rhine defense corridor that week, 60 Bf-109 G6 fighters armed with 30mm Mk-108 cannons, capable of destroying a P-51 with a single hit. The 8th Air Force had already lost 23 fighters in the previous 48 hours trying to escort bomber formations through that airspace. Yeager's position was a tactical nightmare designed by circumstance. His flight of 4 Mustangs had been separated from the main escort force while engaging German fighters at lower altitude, the only Americans within 40 miles of hostile territory. His only weapons were 1 Browning M2.5 caliber machine gun in each wing with 1,880 rounds total and 20 German fighters that had every advantage in numbers, position, and local knowledge. The Luftwaffe's P-51D Mustang was the finest air superiority fighter in the European theater. It weighed 12,100 pounds fully loaded and could reach speeds of 437 miles per hour at altitude. The fighter carried 6 Browning M2.5 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing, with approximately 400 rounds per gun. Maximum effective range was 800 yards, though experienced pilots preferred firing at distances under 300 yards where bullet density was highest. Yeager's job was simple: escort bomber formations to their targets and destroy any German fighters attempting to attack the bombers. The Luftwaffe had learned by late 1944 that American fighter pilots were extremely aggressive and would pursue German aircraft deep into hostile airspace if provoked. By October 1944, the 8th Air Force was losing fighters at a sustainable but significant rate. The mission to Bremen on October 6th had cost the fighter groups 11 P-51s destroyed and 7 damaged, 18 fighters knocked out in one mission. Some squadrons were losing 15% of their aircraft every month. The mathematics of survival were brutal. A fighter pilot had to complete 30 combat missions to rotate home. Statistical analysis showed the average pilot lasted 14 missions before being killed, captured, or seriously wounded. Some squadrons were losing 8 pilots every month. Yeager had enlisted in the United States Army Air Forces on September 12, 1941, growing up poor in West Virginia where the Depression had devastated the local economy. He had dreamed of becoming a mechanic, working on aircraft engines in the relative safety of stateside bases. The Air Forces needed pilots, young men with excellent eyesight and reflexes sharp enough to track fast-moving targets. Training at Luke Field in Arizona had taught him aerial gunnery, formation tactics, and the technical specifications of the P-51. Instructors had emphasized deflection shooting, the technique of leading a moving target to account for bullet travel time and target movement. Yeager had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship, scoring in the top 5% of his training class. But training could not prepare anyone for the reality of air combat over Germany. The temperature at 25,000 feet dropped to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Pilots flew in electrically heated suits that frequently malfunctioned, causing frostbite on exposed skin. And the Luftwaffe fielded experienced pilots who had survived years of combat on the Eastern Front, men who understood air-to-air tactics better than any training manual. Yeager had already been shot down once. On March 5, 1944, during his 8th combat mission, a German fighter had hit his P-51 with 20mm cannon fire over France. He had bailed out, evaded capture, and escaped through Spain with the help of the French resistance. The entire ordeal had taken 97 days. Army Air Force's regulations stated that pilots who had evaded capture could not return to combat in the same theater. The reasoning was simple. If captured again, the Germans would torture them for information about resistance networks. Yeager had personally lobbied General Dwight Eisenhower for permission to return to combat duty. Eisenhower had granted the exception on June 12, 1944. Now, Yeager was back in combat with the 357th Fighter Group, 363rd Fighter Squadron, flying missions deep into Germany. His squadron mates called him the luckiest pilot in the group. He had been shot down, evaded the Germans, escaped occupied territory, and somehow convinced the commanding general to let him fly combat again. But luck ran out eventually. October 12th would test whether Yeager's survival skills were as good as his shooting. The 357th Fighter Group had launched from Leiston Airfield in England at 10:15 on the morning of October 12th as part of a maximum effort escort mission for the 8th Air Force. The target was industrial facilities near Bremen, Germany. Protect 1,200 B-17 and B-24 bombers during their penetration, bombing run, and withdrawal, one of the largest daylight raids of the European campaign. The fighter formation had assembled over the English Channel in 3 staggered groups. The theory was simple: position fighters above, below, and flanking the bomber stream to intercept German fighters from any attack angle. The reality was that Luftwaffe controllers tracked the formations from 200 miles away and positioned their fighters to exploit gaps in the escort coverage. Bremen's defensive fighter force consisted of approximately 180 aircraft dispersed across 6 airfields surrounding the city. Intelligence reports indicated the Luftwaffe was concentrating Bf-109 and FW-190 fighters specifically to challenge the American escort fighters before they could reach the bombers. German doctrine had evolved from attacking bombers directly to engaging the escorts first, clearing them from specific sectors, then hitting the vulnerable bomber formations. Yeager's flight of 4 P-51s was assigned to the high cover position, patrolling 5,000 feet above the main bomber stream. 4 aircraft designated as Blue Flight, with Yeager flying as Blue 3. The lead aircraft was commanded by Captain Clarence Anderson, a veteran pilot with 6 confirmed kills. Anderson's wingman was Lieutenant Gordon McDaniel. Yeager's wingman was Lieutenant Edward Simpson. The formation had crossed into German airspace at 12:30, flying at 28,000 feet through crystal-clear skies that offered unlimited visibility. Every aircraft was visible for miles. There was no weather to hide in, no clouds to use for concealment. The Americans were completely exposed. At 13:15, radar controllers vectored Blue Flight toward reported German fighters attempting to approach the bomber stream from the south. Anderson led the flight into a descending turn, dropping from 28,000 feet to 24,000 feet while scanning for targets. That was when they spotted the first Germans, a formation of approximately 8 Bf-109s climbing toward the bombers from below. Anderson called the sighting over the radio and led Blue Flight into an attack dive. The 4 P-51s descended at 450 miles per hour, building speed to catch the German fighters before they could reach the bombers. Yeager watched Anderson's Mustang open fire at 600 yards. Tracer rounds streaked toward the leading Bf-109. The German fighter broke hard left, avoiding the burst. The other Bf-109s scattered, splitting into pairs and diving away from the attack. Blue Flight followed them down. Anderson was chasing one Bf-109. McDaniel was engaging another. Yeager and Simpson stayed together, pursuing 2 German fighters that had broken right and were diving toward lower altitude. The altitude dropped rapidly. 22,000 feet, 20,000 feet, 18,000 feet. The Bf-109s were not running. They were drawing the American fighters down into a trap. At 16,000 feet, Yeager spotted the second German formation. 12 more Bf-109s were climbing toward them from below, perfectly positioned to bounce the P-51s while they were focused on the first group of targets. Another 8 Bf-109s were circling 4,000 feet above, cutting off the Americans' escape route back to altitude. 20 German fighters, 4 American fighters. Blue Flight had been suckered into a perfectly executed tactical trap. Anderson called for the flight to break off and climb back to altitude.
but the Germans above them were already diving to attack. The Germans below were accelerating to intercept. Blue Flight was boxed in with German fighters on 3 sides. Yeager heard gunfire over the radio. McDaniel's voice, excited and urgent, reporting that he had hit one of the Bf-109s. Then Anderson's transmission, calmer but strained, ordering the flight to stay together and fight through to the west. But staying together was impossible. The German fighters were attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. Each American pilot had to engage the most immediate threat. Formation discipline collapsed into individual dogfights scattered across 10,000 feet of altitude and 5 miles of horizontal space. Simpson called out a Bf-109 on Yeager's tail. Yeager rolled inverted and pulled the Mustang into a split-S maneuver, diving away while the German fighter fired and missed. Tracer rounds passed above his canopy, so close he could see the orange glow of the incendiary rounds.
He pulled out of the dive at 12,000 feet, searching for Simpson. His wingman was gone. The radio was a chaos of overlapping transmissions. Pilots calling out threats, reporting hits, requesting assistance. Yeager could not locate any of the other 3 American fighters. He was alone. 20 Bf-109s were somewhere in the immediate airspace, and he had just used half his fuel in the dive and recovery. The tactical situation was unsalvageable. Standard procedure called for disengaging and running for friendly territory at maximum speed. A lone fighter against 20 was not a fight. It was suicide. But Yeager saw something the German fighters had not noticed. 3 Bf-109s were flying in loose formation 2,000 feet below him, apparently unaware that an American fighter was directly above them. They were focused on something else, probably chasing one of the other P-51s. He rolled into a dive. The decision was instinctive, made without conscious thought. He was a fighter pilot. German fighters were in his sights. He did what he was trained to do. Yeager closed on the trailing Bf-109 at 480 miles per hour. The German pilot had not checked his 6 o'clock position. Fatal mistake. The Mustang's 6.50 caliber machine guns were armed and ready. Yeager placed the illuminated gun sight reticle directly on the Bf-109's fuselage. 400 yards, 300 yards, 200 yards. He squeezed the trigger at 180 yards. All 6 guns fired simultaneously. The combined rate of fire was 4,800 rounds per minute, approximately 80 bullets per second streaming toward the target. The Mustang shuddered from the recoil. The .5 caliber rounds walked up the Bf-109's fuselage from tail to cockpit. Metal fragments exploded off the German fighter's skin. The canopy shattered. The Bf-109 rolled left and entered a flat spin, smoke pouring from the engine cowling. Yeager watched the German fighter spiral downward. No parachute. The pilot was either dead or incapacitated. First kill. The engagement had lasted 4 seconds. The second Bf-109 in the formation broke hard right, the pilot finally aware that an American fighter was behind him. Yeager followed the brake, pulling 6 Gs in the turn. His vision grayed at the edges from the force. He tightened his stomach muscles and grunted against the pressure to keep blood flowing to his brain. The German pilot was good. He rolled inverted and pulled into a split S, diving away while reversing direction. Standard evasion maneuver. Yeager anticipated it and rolled the Mustang to follow. The P-51 had better high-speed handling than the Bf-109. He stayed glued to the German's tail through the dive. The Bf-109 pulled out at 8,000 feet and immediately reversed into a climbing turn. The pilot was trying to use the Bf-109's superior rate of climb to gain altitude advantage. But Yeager had maintained speed through the dive. He cut inside the German's turn and closed the distance. At 250 yards, Yeager fired a 2-second burst. Half the rounds missed, but 8 or 9 .5 caliber bullets hit the Bf-109's left wing root.
The wing separated from the fuselage. The German fighter tumbled out of control, breaking apart as it fell. Second kill. Total engagement time from first contact, 38 seconds. The third Bf-109 from the original formation was running. The pilot had seen both his wingmen destroyed and was diving for the deck at maximum speed. Yeager pursued. The chase covered 12 miles in 90 seconds. Both fighters were screaming through the air at 450 miles per hour, racing toward the ground. At 4,000 feet, the German pilot made a mistake. He pulled up slightly to check if the American was still behind him. That 2-second pause in his dive was enough. Yeager closed from 400 yards to 220 yards and fired. The burst hit the Bf-109's engine. Coolant sprayed from the punctured radiator. White smoke streamed behind the German fighter. The engine was dying. The pilot would have to bail out or attempt a forced landing. Yeager did not wait to see which option the German chose. He pulled up and scanned for threats. His training had drilled the lesson into muscle memory. Never focus on a single target for more than 10 seconds. Always check 6 o'clock. Always scan the sky. 3 Bf-109s appeared above him at 8,000 feet, diving toward his position. They had spotted him during the chase and were moving to intercept. Yeager pushed the throttle to maximum and turned hard into their attack. Meeting a head-on pass was dangerous, but it forced the German pilots to make snap shooting decisions at high closure rates. The range closed at 900 miles per hour combined speed. Yeager opened fire at 800 yards, spraying bullets through the airspace the German fighters would occupy in the next second. The Bf-109s returned fire. Tracers crisscrossed the sky between the opposing aircraft. At 200 yards, both sides broke. Yeager rolled right and pulled hard, avoiding a collision by less than 50 feet. One of the Bf-109s flashed past his canopy so close he could see the German pilot's face. The 3 Bf-109s reversed and came around for another pass, but now they had lost energy in the first engagement. Yeager maintained his speed and used it to climb above them. The Mustang's Packard Merlin engine was pulling maximum power. He gained 2,000 feet before the Germans could react. From above, Yeager rolled into another attack. He selected the trailing Bf-109 and dove. The Germans saw him coming and broke left. Yeager followed, firing a long burst that started at 350 yards and walked closer as both aircraft maneuvered. Hits sparkled along the Bf-109's right wing. The German fighter's aileron was hit. The wing dropped uncontrollably. The pilot struggled to maintain level flight, but the damaged aileron made coordinated turns impossible. The Bf-109 was crippled. Third confirmed kill. Fourth damaged. Time elapsed since first engagement, 3 minutes, 15 seconds. The other 2 Bf-109s from the group disengaged and dove away. They had watched 3 of their squadron mates get destroyed in less than 4 minutes.
German pilots were trained to break off engagements when tactical conditions became unfavorable. Yeager checked his fuel gauge. He had burned through 40% of his fuel in the dogfights and high-speed chases. He needed to start thinking about the flight back to England. But the radio was still full of frantic transmissions. American pilots were still fighting. The bomber stream was still under attack. He climbed back to 16,000 feet and scanned for friendly aircraft. He spotted 2 P-51s 8 miles west, engaged with multiple Bf-109s. The American fighters were outnumbered and being forced lower. Yeager turned toward the fight. The decision was automatic. Other pilots needed help. He had fuel and ammunition. Standard doctrine was irrelevant. He was no longer following orders. He was hunting. If you want to see how Chuck Yeager turned a defensive engagement into the most aggressive killing spree in 8th Air Force history, make sure you're subscribed, because what happened in the next 11 minutes rewrote the definition of fighter ace. At 13:58, Yeager dove on the German fighters attacking the 2 P-51s. He came in from above and behind, using the sun to mask his approach. The Bf-109s were focused on the American fighters ahead of them and did not see Yeager until he opened fire at 280 yards. His first burst hit a Bf-109 in the engine cowling. The German fighter's propeller flew off. The engine seized. The Bf-109 nosed over and entered a vertical dive. The pilot bailed out at 12,000 feet. Fourth confirmed kill. The other German fighters scattered. 2 broke left, 1 broke right, 1 attempted to climb away.
Yeager selected the climbing Bf-109 and pulled the Mustang's nose up to track him. The German pilot was trying to use his aircraft's climb rate advantage, but he had started from low energy after the dogfight with the other P-51s. Yeager fired at 320 yards, leading the target by 3 aircraft lengths. The .50 caliber rounds converged on the Bf-109's tail section. The rudder was shot away. The German fighter yawed violently to the right. The pilot lost control and spun into the ground 9,000 feet below. 5th kill. The 2 P-51s Yeager had rescued joined up on his wings. One pilot was Lieutenant William O'Connor from the 364th Fighter Squadron. The other was Captain Donald Bakke from the 359th. Both pilots reported low fuel and battle damage. O'Connor had taken 20mm cannon hits in his right wing. Bakke's radio was malfunctioning. Yeager signaled for them to head west toward friendly territory. But as the 3 Mustangs turned away from the fight, Yeager spotted another formation of German fighters 4,000 feet below. 6 Bf-109s were forming up to attack a straggling B-17 that had dropped out of the bomber formation with visible engine damage. The B-17 crew had no chance. The bomber's top turret guns were firing, but the German fighters were staying out of effective range, preparing for a coordinated attack that would destroy the crippled bomber in seconds.
O'Connor and Bakke continued west. They were damaged and low on fuel. Staying to fight was not an option. But Yeager rolled his Mustang over and dove toward the 6 Bf-109s. He was alone again, 6 against 1. Standard mathematics said he would die. He opened fire at 400 yards. The range was too long for accurate shooting, but the stream of tracers got the German pilot's attention. All 6 Bf-109s broke off their attack run on the bomber and turned to engage the lone Mustang. Yeager had accomplished his immediate objective. The B-17 was temporarily safe. But now he had 6 German fighters maneuvering for position against him. His ammunition counter showed 680 rounds remaining across all 6 guns, approximately 8 seconds of firing time at maximum rate. The Bf-109s split into 2 groups of 3 and attempted to sandwich Yeager between them. Classic pincer maneuver. German pilots called it the swarm tactic. Force the enemy to focus on one threat while the other group attacked from behind. Yeager turned into the first group, forcing a head-on pass. He fired a 1-second burst at 600 yards. No hits. The Bf-109s fired back and also missed. Both sides broke at the last second, avoiding collision. As Yeager pulled out of the break, the second group of 3 Bf-109s was behind him at 400 yards, perfect firing position. He saw the muzzle flashes from their guns. Tracer rounds streaked toward his Mustang. Yeager pulled 7 Gs in an instantaneous turn that grayed out his vision completely. He could not see. He was flying on instruments and muscle memory. The turn was violent enough that it stalled the Mustang's wing. The fighter shuddered and started to spin. He kicked the rudder and pushed the stick forward, recovering from the incipient spin. His vision cleared. The 3 Bf-109s had overshot his position during his maneuver. They were now ahead of him, presenting their tails. He fired at the nearest Bf-109 from 220 yards, a 2-second burst. Hits ran from the cockpit to the tail. The German fighter exploded. The fuel tank detonated. Burning debris tumbled through the sky. 6th kill. The other 2 Bf-109s in that group broke hard and dove away. They had no interest in continuing the engagement. The first group of 3 was climbing back to altitude, trying to regain position for another attack. Yeager checked his ammunition. 480 rounds remaining, maybe 6 seconds of firing time. Fuel was at 28%. He needed to disengage immediately. But the crippled B-17 was still limping west with 3 engines running. The bomber crew had watched Yeager destroy 1 German fighter and scatter the others. They were transmitting thank you messages over the emergency frequency. The 3 remaining Bf-109s from the first group were repositioning for another attack on the bomber. They were approaching from different angles, forcing Yeager to choose which threat to engage. He could not cover all 3 attack vectors simultaneously. He selected the Bf-109 that was closest to firing position and turned to intercept.
The German pilot saw him coming and attempted to extend away from the fight, running at maximum speed. Yeager pursued.
The chase lasted 40 seconds and covered 6 miles. Both aircraft were flying at 430 miles per hour at 9,000 feet altitude. The German made a mistake. He attempted a climbing turn that bled off his speed. Yeager cut inside the turn and closed from 350 yards to 200 yards in 3 seconds. He fired his last sustained burst. The ammunition counter dropped to 140 rounds remaining. The 50 caliber bullets hit the Bf-109's wing root. The wing folded upward and separated. The German fighter cartwheeled through the air. No parachute. 7th kill. Yeager's guns were effectively empty. 140 rounds distributed across 6 guns meant maybe 1.5 seconds of firing time, not enough to guarantee a kill against a maneuvering target. His fuel was at 24%. The Mustang's engine would quit in approximately 35 minutes at current consumption rate. He was 180 miles inside German territory. The 2 remaining Bf-109s were circling 3,000 feet above him, apparently unwilling to attack but also unwilling to disengage. They were waiting for him to run out of fuel or make a mistake. At 14:11, Yeager spotted contrails at 22,000 feet, multiple aircraft. He counted them through his canopy. 12, possibly 16. More German fighters were arriving. The Luftwaffe had vectored reinforcements to this sector. The tactical situation had gone from dangerous to suicidal. Yeager was alone, almost out of ammunition, low on fuel, deep in hostile territory, with at least 16 fresh German fighters inbound to his position. He turned west and pushed the throttle to maximum. The Packard Merlin engine roared. The Mustang accelerated to 410 miles per hour. He was running. The 2 Bf-109s that had been circling attempted to pursue, but Yeager's P-51 was faster in level flight. He pulled away from them in 90 seconds. The German pilots broke off the chase. The larger formation of fighters at high altitude descended toward him. Yeager watched them dive through 18,000 feet. They were trying to intercept him before he could reach friendly territory. Simple geometry showed they would cut him off in approximately 8 minutes unless he did something unexpected. He descended to 3,000 feet, flying just above the treetops at maximum speed. The German fighters followed him down but had to be cautious at low altitude. One mistake at 400 miles per hour near the ground meant instant death. Yeager had grown up flying crop dusters in West Virginia. Low-altitude, high-speed flying was natural to him. The chase continued for 12 minutes. Yeager dodged around hills and followed river valleys, using terrain to break the German pilot's line of sight. His fuel gauge showed 18%. The engine was consuming fuel at maximum rate. He had maybe 20 minutes before flameout. At 14:26, he crossed into Allied-controlled airspace. The German fighters broke off pursuit at the border.
Luftwaffe were under strict orders not to engage over Allied territory where they would be outnumbered. Yeager climbed back to 8,000 feet and set course for Leiston Airfield. His fuel gauge read 12%. The engine coughed twice, starved for fuel. He switched tanks and the engine smoothed out. He had 15 minutes of flying time remaining. He landed at Leiston at 14:53 with the fuel gauge reading 3%. The ground crew counted 7 bullet holes in his Mustang's fuselage and wings, German 7.92mm machine gun fire. None of the hits had struck critical systems. He had been hit during the first engagement and had not noticed. Yeager climbed out of the cockpit and reported to his squadron commander. 7 confirmed kills, 1 damaged, 1 B-17 saved. Total combat time, 71 minutes. Total ammunition expended, 1,740 rounds. He had become an ace in a single mission. The minimum requirement for ace status was 5 enemy aircraft destroyed. Yeager had exceeded that by 2 kills. No other American pilot in the European theater had achieved ace status in one mission. The gun camera film was developed that evening. The film confirmed all 7 kills with clear footage of each Bf-109 being destroyed. Intelligence officers reviewed the footage frame by frame, documenting the exact sequence of engagements and measuring Yeager's firing accuracy. Analysis showed that Yeager had fired 1,740 rounds during the mission and achieved 7 confirmed kills plus 1 damaged aircraft. The hit rate was approximately 8.3%, which was exceptional for air-to-air combat. Most fighter pilots achieved hit rates between 2% and 4%. Yeager's marksmanship was more than double the average. The tactical debrief revealed the full scope of what had happened. Yeager had engaged 20 German fighters over a 71-minute period while separated from his flight and operating alone for most of the engagement. He had destroyed 7 aircraft, damaged 1, rescued 2 American fighters, and saved a crippled B-17 from certain destruction. 8th Air Force Headquarters requested a detailed after-action report within 48 hours. The engagement was unusual enough that senior commanders wanted to understand the tactical decisions Yeager had made. Standard doctrine called for disengaging when outnumbered more than 3-1. Yeager had engaged at 20-1 odds and won. The other 3 pilots from Blue Flight had survived. Captain Anderson had destroyed 2 Bf-109s before disengaging and returning to base. Lieutenant McDaniel had damaged 1 German fighter. Lieutenant Simpson had been shot down but had successfully bailed out and was captured by German forces. He would spend the rest of the war in a POW camp. The B-17 crew that Yeager had saved landed at an emergency airfield in Belgium with 2 engines failed and extensive battle damage. All 10 crew members survived. The pilot, Captain James Morrison, submitted a written statement crediting Yeager with saving his aircraft and crew. Morrison estimated that without Yeager's intervention, the German fighters would have destroyed his bomber within 90 seconds. News of the mission spread rapidly through the fighter groups stationed in England.
7 kills in one mission was unprecedented. The previous record for a single mission in the European theater was 4 kills, achieved by 3 different pilots on separate occasions. Yeager had exceeded that record by 75%. The 357th Fighter Group commander, Colonel Henry Spicer, recommended Yeager for the Distinguished Service Cross. The recommendation cited his tactical skill, exceptional marksmanship, and the decision to repeatedly engage superior numbers to protect other aircraft. The paperwork was submitted on October 15, 1944. But October 12th was not the end of Yeager's combat tour. He continued flying escort missions over Germany through November and December. On November 6th, he destroyed 2 more Bf-109s during an engagement near Magdeburg. On November 27th, he shot down a Focke-Wulf FW-190 over Berlin. On December 19th, he destroyed another Bf-109. His final kill came on January 14, 1945, when he destroyed a Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter during an engagement near Frankfurt. The Me-262 was the world's first operational jet fighter, capable of speeds exceeding 540 miles per hour. Destroying a jet in a propeller-driven P-51 required perfect positioning and exceptional shooting. Yeager accomplished both. By the time his combat tour ended in January 1945, Yeager had accumulated 11.5 confirmed kills. The half kill represented a shared destruction, where 2 pilots had fired on the same target. He had also damaged 6 additional aircraft and destroyed 3 German aircraft on the ground during strafing runs. The Distinguished Service Cross was presented to Yeager on February 8, 1945, at a ceremony in England. The citation specifically mentioned the October 12th engagement and noted that his actions had contributed materially to the success of the bomber mission and saved the lives of numerous Allied air crews. The Air Force retained Yeager after the war ended. His combination of exceptional piloting skills and aggressive tactical instincts made him valuable for test pilot work. He was assigned to Wright Field in Ohio in 1946 to participate in experimental aircraft programs. On October 14, 1947, Yeager became the first pilot to break the sound barrier in level flight. He was flying the Bell X-1 rocket plane at 45,000 feet when he exceeded Mach 1, reaching a speed of 700 miles per hour. The achievement was classified for 8 months due to Cold War security concerns. The sound barrier flight made Yeager internationally famous. He appeared on the cover of Time magazine. Hollywood producers wanted to make a movie about his life. The Air Force used him extensively for public relations and recruiting efforts, but Yeager insisted on returning to operational flying.
He flew combat missions in Vietnam in 1966, logging 127 missions in various aircraft, including the F-100 Super Sabre. He was 43 years old during that tour, significantly older than most fighter pilots. His combat effectiveness had not diminished. Yeager retired from the Air Force on March 1, 1975, with the rank of Brigadier General. His 34-year career included service in World War II, the Korean War airlift operations, Vietnam, and numerous test pilot programs.
He had flown more than 180 different military aircraft types and logged over 12,000 flight hours. The October 12, 1944 engagement remained the defining moment of his combat career. 7 kills in one mission, 20 German fighters engaged, 71 minutes of continuous combat. The tactical impossibility that Yeager had made possible through skill, aggression, and refusal to accept defeat. Military historians later analyzed the engagement and concluded that Yeager had exploited 3 key advantages. First, exceptional marksmanship that allowed him to achieve kills with minimal ammunition expenditure. Second, superior energy management that let him maintain speed and altitude advantage throughout multiple engagements. Third, tactical unpredictability that prevented German pilots from coordinating effective responses. The gun camera footage was used in training films for the next 30 years. Fighter pilots studied Yeager's deflection shooting technique and his use of vertical maneuvers to control engagement geometry. The tactical lessons from October 12 influenced Air Force fighter doctrine through the Vietnam era. Yeager himself rarely discussed the mission in detail. When asked about becoming an ace in one afternoon, he typically responded that he had gotten lucky with target opportunities and had good visibility that day. He deflected credit to his aircraft maintenance crew and the quality of the P-51 Mustang, but the numbers told a different story. 7 enemy aircraft destroyed, 0 friendly losses, 1 crippled bomber saved, 71 minutes of combat against overwhelming odds. That was not luck. That was mastery of air combat at the highest possible level. The October 12th engagement fundamentally changed how the United States Air Force approached fighter pilot training. Prior to Yeager's mission, training programs emphasized formation discipline and coordinated tactics. The assumption was that fighter pilots would always operate as part of a larger group with mutual support. Yeager proved that assumption was dangerously incomplete. His engagement demonstrated that individual pilots separated from their formations needed specific training in lone wolf tactics. Within 6 months of the mission, the Air Force added modules on single aircraft defensive and offensive maneuvers to the training curriculum at all fighter schools. The key tactical innovation was Yeager's use of vertical maneuvers to control engagement timing. Traditional dogfighting doctrine emphasized horizontal turns to gain position advantage. Yeager repeatedly used climbs and dives to break contact, reposition, and attack from unexpected angles. German pilots trained extensively in horizontal maneuvering, but were less prepared for aggressive vertical tactics. His ammunition management was analyzed extensively by gunnery instructors. Yeager had destroyed 7 aircraft and damaged 1 using 1,740 rounds. That represented an average of 218 rounds per kill. The Air Force average was approximately 850 rounds per kill. Yeager's efficiency was nearly 4 times better than standard performance. The difference came down to firing discipline. Most pilots fired long bursts from excessive range, wasting ammunition on low-probability shots. Yeager closed to point-blank range before firing and used short, precise bursts. The gun camera footage showed that his longest burst was 2.4 seconds. Most of his kills were achieved with bursts lasting less than 1.5 seconds. Fighter gunnery programs incorporated this lesson immediately. Instructors began emphasizing patience and range discipline over volume of fire. The motto, "Get close, then get closer," became standard teaching at gunnery schools. The principle was directly traceable to analysis of Yeager's October 12th engagement. What made Yeager's record exceptional was context. By October 1944, the Luftwaffe was fielding experienced pilots who had survived years of combat on the Eastern Front. These were not novice pilots making basic mistakes. They were veterans who understood air combat tactics as well as any pilots in the world. Yeager had defeated 20 of these experienced pilots in a single mission. That achievement placed him in a category with the highest scoring aces from any nation. German ace Erich Hartmann had destroyed 7 Soviet aircraft in one mission on July 7, 1943. British ace James Johnson had destroyed 6 German aircraft on September 27, 1944. Yeager's 7 kills on October 12th matched the best single-mission performances by the top aces of World War II. The United States Air Force promoted Yeager's story extensively during the final months of the war. His image appeared on recruitment posters with text emphasizing that American pilots could defeat German fighters regardless of numerical odds. The propaganda value was significant during a period when the Air Force needed to maintain morale and recruitment levels. But the promotion created friction with other pilots. Some squadron mates resented the attention Yeager received for one exceptional mission when they had flown equally dangerous missions without recognition. The tension was particularly acute among pilots who had been shot down or captured. They viewed Yeager's survival and success as luck rather than skill. Yeager's response to the criticism was characteristically blunt. He acknowledged that luck played a role in any combat survival, but pointed out that he had created opportunities through aggressive tactics and precise shooting. 7 kills in one mission was not random chance. It was the result of thousands of hours of training and 71 minutes of nearly perfect execution. The breaking of the sound barrier in 1947 overshadowed Yeager's World War II record in public consciousness. Most Americans knew him as the test pilot who flew faster than sound, not as the fighter ace who destroyed 7 German fighters in one afternoon. The X-1 flight became his defining achievement in popular culture. However, within military aviation circles, the October 12th engagement remained the more significant accomplishment. Test pilots flew experimental aircraft with extensive engineering support and safety protocols. Fighter pilots engaged enemy aircraft alone, with no backup and no margin for error. The communities valued different types of achievement. The United States Air Force Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base added Yeager's mission to its case study curriculum in 1958. Student fighter pilots analyzed his tactical decisions, energy management, and target selection. The engagement was presented as an example of how superior skills could overcome numerical disadvantage in specific tactical situations. The lesson was carefully qualified. Instructors emphasized that Yeager's approach required exceptional marksmanship and situational awareness.
Average pilots attempting similar tactics against superior numbers would likely be killed. The mission was presented as an upper bound of possibility, not as recommended standard practice. Modern fighter pilots still study the October 12th engagement. The tactical principles remain relevant even with technological changes to air combat. Energy management, firing discipline, and aggressive maneuvering are as important in beyond visual range missile combat as they were in guns-only dogfighting. The preservation of Yeager's gun camera footage became a priority for Air Force historians. The film was digitized in 1989 to prevent deterioration. Copies were distributed to all fighter training squadrons. The footage represents one of the most complete visual records of World War II air combat from the pilot's perspective. Yeager's 11.5 total kills placed him in the middle tier of American aces. 43 American pilots in the European theater exceeded that number. Major George Preddy led all European theater pilots with 26.8 kills. But Preddy's kills were accumulated across 139 combat missions. Yeager achieved 11.5 kills in 64 missions, giving him a per-mission average that exceeded most higher-scoring aces. The statistical analysis revealed an interesting pattern. Yeager's kill rate was highest during his first 20 missions and his last 20 missions. The middle period showed lower productivity. Combat psychologists studying pilot performance curves suggested that Yeager had experienced a mid-tour slump common among fighter pilots, followed by recovery as he approached the end of his combat rotation. But October 12th occurred during the theoretical slump period. The 7-kill mission happened on Yeager's 7th flight after returning from escape and evasion. Standard psychological models predicted reduced effectiveness during that time frame. Yeager's performance defied the pattern. His explanation was simple. He had spent 97 days evading Germans in occupied France. That experience gave him perspective on risk. Being outnumbered 20-1 in a fighter aircraft seemed manageable compared to walking through enemy territory with no weapons and no support.
The evasion experience had recalibrated his baseline for danger. The Air Force incorporated that insight into survival training. Pilots who had experienced genuine life-threatening situations in non-combat contexts often performed better under combat stress. The programs began including more realistic survival scenarios designed to give pilots experience managing fear and making decisions under extreme pressure. Yeager's legacy in fighter aviation extended beyond his individual achievements. He proved that aggressive tactics, precise shooting, and refusal to accept tactical disadvantage could produce results that seemed impossible by conventional analysis. That lesson influenced 3 generations of American fighter pilots. So if you found value in learning about what Chuck Yeager accomplished in those skies over Germany on October 12, 1944, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps us reach thousands more people who need to hear these stories. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Charles E. Yeager doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that.